I mean, the session will be recorded in French and English for later.
Okay, great. I think
over to you, Christina.
I'll just share my screen now. So yes, to start with today, I'm going to briefly talk about groundwater assessment. So why should we assess groundwater? Well, groundwater accounts for 98%.
Christina, we cannot see your presentation.
Oh.
We can see you, but not your PowerPoint.
Oh, well, okay, maybe I didn't share my screen then. Okay.
I forgot also to, maybe I should have recalled the house rules, but please keep yourself muted all the time. Keep your microphone muted unless you have been given the possibility, the permission to speak. If you want to speak, there will be dedicated sessions for exchanging with the others. Just raise your hand and you will be given the possibility to talk. Otherwise, you can use the chat anytime to ask your questions, and then we'll follow up later. But please keep your microphone muted to avoid any background noise. Thank you.
Okay, take two. Yeah, so we're going to talk about groundwater assessment this morning. Why should we assess groundwater? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so groundwater accounts for 98% of the available freshwater resources to us, and it's also very heavily relied upon across Africa for drinking water, agriculture, irrigation. And groundwater also provides regulatory, societal, and supporting services for many people and organizations across the region. So it's really important to understand this resource so that we can manage it properly. And not only that, when we don't manage it properly, it can pose a threat through pollution and over-abstraction. But no two aquifers are the same. So this means that we can't generalize when we look at assessing an aquifer, and every aquifer and their specific boundary conditions, the geology, the setting, the environment that that aquifer is in is going to be different. So that's why we need to assess each individual one in detail, depending on the type of issues that we're trying to address. So these kind of assessments can range from the local level, where we're looking at very, very specific details of the aquifer. We can look at regional, national levels, which are a bit more broad, and we can either assess aquifers at a more global level using indicators and more kind of satellite technology and things like that. But it's important to note that we shouldn't just be assessing aquifers and groundwater as a reactive response to a management issue that has developed. Groundwater assessments really also need to be proactive. So we need to be assessing and ultimately managing the resource before problems arise. When we think about groundwater assessment, we really need to consider that groundwater is only one component within the full water cycle. And therefore, we need to consider all aspects of the system when we look at assessing the resource, because the groundwater can have effects on other parts of the system, and other parts of the system can affect groundwater. So it's really important to understand all of those components together. So what's the kind of data that we're looking at when we want to assess groundwater? Well, we start with the technical hydrogeological basis, but it's more than that, it's multidisciplinary. So we also need to consider the environmental and hydrological aspects. For example, the water system that I just spoke about, and we also need to consider socio and economic aspects such as population and really the social and economic setting, the transboundary that the aquifer is in. And then we need to look at the institutional and legal frameworks that support the management of the aquifer and the groundwater. So to start with hydrogeology, this is the real technical basis that we're starting with when we want to really understand the dynamics of the aquifer, specifically the location of it, how deep it is, how far it expands. We want to look at aspects of the lithology, the geology, so that we can understand how the water is moving through the rocks. Is it a sedimentary aquifer? Is it a fractured aquifer? And then we want to understand even more specifics about the porosity and the transmissivity and the hydraulic conductivity of the actual parameters of the aquifer. We then need to consider recharge rate, source, how much water is actually being stored in the aquifer, and also looking at the level of the groundwater and naturally how good the quality of the water is. There are two main different ways of gathering this hydrogeological data for groundwater assessment. The first is through boreholes, drilling them and then testing them. And that's when you can really start to understand the local conditions of the aquifer. You can understand the stratigraphy within the aquifer and really get an idea of how water is going to move through that portion of the aquifer towards a borehole when water is pumped. The second way of gathering data for groundwater assessment is through monitoring, which we'll speak more about in the course later. And this is really important because assessment of groundwater shouldn't just be a one-time thing. It needs to be continuous because it's a dynamic system and it's constantly changing, particularly when we are then abstracting water from the system or we're potentially contaminating the system. We need to understand how those changes are affecting the groundwater. So then moving on to the more environmental aspects, which are kind of looking at a more broader context of the system set within the environment and the water cycle. We need to understand rainfall and the effects of climate onto the aquifer, and in order to understand how much recharge the aquifer might get. We want to know if there are any ecosystems that are dependent on the groundwater from the aquifer. And we also want to know if there's any connection to surface waters within the aquifer, and also how much surface water within that area is available, because the availability of surface water might impact the use of groundwater. Then moving on to the more socio-economical aspects, which is really trying to define the pressures that the groundwater within the aquifer might experience and the use for the groundwater. So aspects like population density is going to be really important. How dependent on the groundwater are the people living on the aquifer? Are they using it for domestic agriculture, industry, or are they looking to surface water instead? And ultimately, knowing and understanding how much water is being abstracted from the aquifer is essential, because then that can notify us of early signs of depletion within the system. And then this last component, which is an assessment because it's important to understand these aspects, but this is more to frame the resource in a context of management and how well the aquifer is currently being managed, what scope there is for future management. So we want to look at the existing agreements, if there are any, over abstraction from the aquifer, and also look at what potential conventions internationally that the resource could fall under. And also it's important to understand the capacity institutionally to manage the resource. Not only that, then we need to consider whether the laws and the regulations that are already in place are actually working, and whether they're actually being implemented, because quite often there are regulations and laws that are designed to manage the system, but they're often not enforced. Just a note to mention about groundwater data, because data is really, really useful, but it really needs to be translated into useful information, because it's the information that can assist with decision making. Just raw data that we collect from monitoring, for example, is not useful unless it can be put into a context that can then show a problem. So for example, collecting groundwater level data, the raw data is not useful unless we then present that in a way that we can understand what's happening in the system. So for example, plotting it as a graph, and not even just being able to plot it, being able to actually understand the results from that graph and being able to understand what it means. And that's where the capacity of hydrogeologists working within these aquifers and in these regions is really essential. So just to mention that IGRAC have developed guidelines for multidisciplinary assessment, and the guidelines are specific to transboundary aquifers, but as I said yesterday, really the data and the understanding that we need for transboundary aquifers are the same for all aquifers. It's not just transboundary. So these guidelines might be quite relevant in understanding the specific types of data in more detail that we're looking to collect when we're wanting to understand a normal aquifer and a transboundary aquifer. Thank you. I think I'll pass it back over to you, Arnaud.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. Just to summarize, you cannot have proper groundwater management without knowing about the resource. So you need groundwater assessment. And for groundwater assessment, you need data, a lot of data from different aspects. And you need people to turn the data into meaningful information. And the data, like I said, they come from different fields. You will need geological data, hydrogeological data, meteorological data, data about surface water, data about the environment, data about land use, etc. But really what is at the very important is the groundwater data. This is for groundwater assessment, you need groundwater data. And there again, there are of different types. There are two main sets of groundwater data, which are usually collected by the states and who are the basis at the basis of groundwater characterization, groundwater assessment. And those are monitoring data and borehole data. So now my colleague Claudia will present on groundwater monitoring, and then I will present on borehole data collection. Thank you, Christina, and over to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Arnaud, and thank you, Christina, for your presentation. Good morning, everyone. I am Claudia Vargas. I am also a researcher at IGRAC, and now I'm going to present you about groundwater monitoring. So let me share my screen. Do you see my screen in full presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So as Christina introduced already, we have a groundwater assessment, which is key in order to reach a proper groundwater management. So what Christina already said, to perform the groundwater assessment, we will need to collect several types of data, environmental data, hydrogeological data, etc. And one of the data that can be collected is monitoring data. Monitoring data are data that are collected with a certain frequency, and they are mainly observations of the groundwater resource. There can be quality observations, for example, quality parameters, or groundwater levels, or pumping data, flow, etc. Groundwater monitoring is something that, well, is really important, and it is not really something new. Actually, there are a lot of material available. For example, we have all these guidelines, a guideline made by IGRAC, but also guidelines made by other international organizations like UNECE, the World Bank, EU, etc. So to start a monitoring program, it should be quite not so difficult to find information appropriate to start doing it. to think about groundwater monitoring, there are some main considerations. So in order to design a groundwater monitoring network, we need to consider the purpose of the monitoring, which variables are going to be monitored, the design of the network itself, some data management, and some institutional arrangements. And we are going to go through all of them in this presentation. So regarding the purpose, this is the most important thing, in my opinion, because we need to know why we are doing this groundwater monitoring. In general, there are three main reasons why to do it. So it can be to monitor the resource, also to comply with something, and also to protect. For example, if we want to monitor the resources, that means that maybe we want to know how much water there is, how the levels are changing, trends of the resource, how the quality is changing. Regarding to compliance, we want to know if we are complying with certain rules or laws. So we want to know if the quality is below to certain range or number. And also, for example, if we are using the groundwater for drinking purposes or for irrigation, we want to know which areas we need to protect. So we need to monitor those areas in order to not go above certain limits. So if you think about it, these three different kind of purposes are interlinked. So protection can be also related to compliance and also to the resource. So in this slide, I'm showing you these three type of purpose, but from two different sources. One is the Water Framework Directive from Europe, and the other one is from the UNECE, but they are very similar. Another type of purpose could be, for example, to monitor how climate change is affecting the groundwater resources. And this is, for example, something that the USGS, so the Geological Survey of the United States, is doing at the moment. So yeah, it depends on you, what kind of purpose you can give to your monitoring network. There are also some purposes related to the management of transboundary aquifers. If you have a transboundary resource, it could be that there are several monitoring networks overlapping a little bit. So these stations can be, so at the same time that you define the purpose for each of them, you can also use some of them to create another network. So at the end, you will be using certain wells for different purposes. That's also allowed. But the thing is that it's very clear for what you are using each of your stations and to what monitoring network each of them belong. Sorry, if I was going too fast, I will go a little bit slower. Regarding the variables, I mentioned before that we can have many types, but we can think of them in two different groups that are quantity and quality variables. So the most important variables in terms of quantity are groundwater levels, spring flows, groundwater abstraction, and also other complementary variables that are related to the levels of surface water courses that are close to the groundwater resources or around, and also the level in ecosystems that are groundwater dependent. And we also have quality parameters. In terms of quality, depends on the country. In some countries, some of them are mandatory, like for example, the content of oxygen, pH value, electrical conductivity, nitrates. But there are also other quality parameters that will depend on the purpose of your network. So for example, if your groundwater resource is close to like a mid type of industry where a lot of organic contaminants are going to the water, maybe you will want to monitor that too, or a certain type of industry. yeah, it will depend on your purpose. So that's why that's the most important thing and the first thing you have to do. So then you can define your variables. But you don't have to start from scratch to define your variables and your monitoring objectives, because as I mentioned, there are many guidelines and some of them really can give you a good orientation about it. So for example, we have this table from IGRAC from 2008. And we can see if we pick, for example, number 3, what would be the best location for well fields? For different types of wells, we immediately know that we will need to monitor levels and quantity for observation wells, for pumping wells quality, and springs also quality. So we have purpose, then variables, and now we go to the network design and optimization. So the network design is related to the frequency of observation and the density of the network. So the frequency is how many times, let's say per day or per month or per year, you are going to monitor the groundwater. And the density is how many stations we need to monitor the resource properly. To define these two things, density and frequency, it is very important to understand the hydrogeological setting. And this is something that is already understood, hopefully, if our groundwater assessment was doing before setting the monitoring network. But it's also related to long-term planning of the network. So are there funds for to keep the network for 5 more years? Or is there enough resources to monitor every month, for example? Can we send people to the fields every month to measure the levels? Or maybe we can invest in automatic data loggers. Can the stations be secure so we can put there the automatic data loggers and they will stay for 5 years? So all these questions have to be posed in this stage. So yeah, the frequency and the density can be defined. Also for this, as I mentioned, the assessment has to happen before, because a lot of things will influence where the stations are going to be constructed, or the density or the frequency. For example, if there is a city close by, if you want to measure the impact on groundwater quality from the city, for example, or the quality of the groundwater close to small settlements. Is there a waste field next, close by or not? Is there a protected area or not? So all these things need to be considered in order to place the stations in the best place to measure exactly what we want to measure. Other things that need to be considered are the hydrogeological setting and also the geography of the place. But again, hopefully this will be considered in the stage before, so in the groundwater assessment. In this case, the terrain will have to be divided in different catchments, so to see how surface water will interact with groundwater, if there is an overlap with the aquifer and the basin. And of course, it will depend on the setting of where the mountainous areas are, if it is a flat area, if the sea is close by, etc. All the things need to be analyzed either during the groundwater assessment and again in this stage. Other things that are important to know is that groundwater presents fluctuations. So the level of groundwater, it doesn't stay the same all the time. You can imagine that it will change if water is abstracted, so the level will go down if water is pumping out. But there are also other types of fluctuations, fluctuations that are related, for example, to the fulcrum, when there is more precipitation, and if for example, it's a surface like a shallow aquifer, it will there will be recharge and the level will go up. And all these things, when you analyze the data in a long term, you will see a certain pattern. So it's also if there are wells available existing wells before setting the groundwater monitoring network that you want to set, it is important to try to analyze this long-term data and see what kind of patterns there are, so you are able to identify the fluctuations you are able to identify the fluctuations with your defined frequency. For example, if you will say, okay, I'm going to monitor every 3 months, maybe you're not able to see how the water is fluctuating. So then you will have to monitor the groundwater with higher frequency, for example, every 2 weeks. It is also important to understand the density in terms of space. So the stations need also be located in strategic positions or relevant positions. So you will try to cover all or most of the hydrogeological features, or the most important ones. You will try to capture changes in the groundwater that are not related to each other, because otherwise your data would be not really useful because they will be telling you the same all the time. So it would be good to try to capture different places in the aquifer. And then, after, when you have your results, you can try different interpolations to see how the groundwater level will change in the whole area. But that's for later when you want to interpret your data. Again, you don't have to start from scratch. There are many guidelines. And again, we have the guideline from IGRAC, which is telling you like what's the density that a network should have depending on the aquifer type. And we can see a little bit of a pattern. So if there is a large spatial variation in the aquifer and the aquifer is unconfined, you will see that the density required is really high. Sorry, I just got a message in the chat. Apparently some people are experience problems in the network and the audio. So I hope you can hear me correct, and it's not everybody that has a problem.
No, I don't see anything in the chat.
It's a direct
that was in a
message.
private message.
But the recording will be shared later, right?
Yeah.
So
and
then
on my side, it's okay. So probably a internet connection issue on the side of some participants.
Good to know that people are hearing me correctly. Good, that's good. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so again, we have our purpose. We define our variables. We define the setting of the network. So we are ready to start collecting data. So we collect data and so on. But as also Christina mentioned before, it's really important to do something with the data, because that's the final objective of your network. So not to just collect the data and store it somewhere, but to use it to get relevant information that will be helpful for you to manage your research in a better way. But to do something with the data first, it needs to be processed. What I mean is that data needs to be, first it has to go through a certain quality control to see that there are not outliers, or that the data is showing like a plausible scenarios, that there is not some crazy data in between, because that could mean that maybe your equipment is not installed in a proper way, or something is failing like physically in your network. And also, this is especially important in the case of transboundary aquifers, because if you will get data from different countries, then you will need maybe to harmonize the language, the reference system, the formats. So the data will be put in order. So in the in the next stage, it can be processed to get information out of it. That information can be contour maps or hydrographs or Piper diagrams, etc. And then you could have your data stored in just in a file, but a much better way to do it is to have it in a system that also allows you to check spatial information. So, for example, this system that I'm showing you, I know it's quite old, but it's like a proof that this is not really something new. Like for many years, groundwater managers are trying to put like data together in this way. So trying to see how groundwater levels change, for example, in a graph, but also in the context of in a spatial context, and also combining this information with the lithology. So really to mix everything in order to get useful information. Okay, so I said a little bit about groundwater monitoring as your network that you will design, but I just wanted to take also a moment to think about groundwater monitoring on a global scale. Is this possible? This is something really difficult because, of course, groundwater monitoring will depend on each network. Some countries have national networks, but some others don't have. For many countries, data are private. So there's not really sufficient information to know the state of threats of groundwater globally, both groundwater quantity and groundwater quality. But as we can say that we can manage what we don't measure, so we are not really able to manage groundwater globally because we cannot measure it globally either. There are some studies going on related to satellites, so the GRAC satellite. And this satellite, what it does, it measures the change of the total water storage. So not only groundwater, but also soil moisture, surface water, etc. And this, provides an indication from where there is more or less water, but not really related to groundwater. So there is still a long path to go in order to know it related to groundwater. There are also global models, but global models can be very inaccurate. And as you can see in this slide, where a model says that there will be a decrease in recharge, another model says it will be an increase in recharge. So again, this provides an indication, but there is not really anything that will provide a picture of the change of groundwater resources in a global scale. And that's why that here at IGRAC, we created the Global Groundwater Monitoring Network, which is a program in which we try to improve the quality and accessibility of groundwater monitoring information. This is divided in two components, which is one is the people network and the other one is the portal. So I wanted to go through it quickly also in this presentation, so you can know also how you can benefit from this program. So the people network are the hydrogeologists, groundwater specialists, and all people that work with groundwater in their countries. And they are the ones that are populating this portal with groundwater data and information. And they are key for our program. One activity that we did under our GGMN program was to collect information about groundwater monitoring networks in each country. So we did a global overview with more than 80 countries. And in Africa, we collected information from 24 countries. So this was really great to collect this information to be updated on the status on each country. The countries that are missing doesn't mean that they don't have a groundwater monitoring program, but it's just that we couldn't find information about it. And it was nice because we could make a country profile in which we describe the institutional setting and purpose of the network, characteristics related to number of stations, frequency, and density of the network, and also how they process and disseminate their data. Yeah, so I guess you want to look at it later, please do. I think it's, yeah, very interesting. And yeah, about the portal. I'm not sure if this was mentioned yesterday at some point, that we have a brand new system, the GGIS, the Global Groundwater Information System. And inside it, we have hosted our DGMN portal, in which we upload, store, visualize, and download groundwater level data from all around the world. Yeah, what is really nice about this portal, and it's also related to what I mentioned before, is that we have a dedicated database to store groundwater data. So not only data about drilling and construction, hydrology, so data that are key for assessment, but also metadata related to monitoring. So if you need still some guidance about what do you need to collect next to monitoring data, you can easily see it here in the dedicated database in all the fields that you are able to fill in. Well, the system have also the possibility to overlay maps. You have here some global maps, as transboundary aquifer, hydrogeological map, but also you can put there any map you want. Again, with the objective to understand the groundwater monitoring data in a context, to get the most information out of it. In this portal, the idea is to share data, which can be done automatically via different systems, as the SOS system or the application program interface, API, other technologies. And we are right now in the process of getting more data from more countries automatically. And we also have an app which facilitates the collection of water monitoring data in the field. So yeah, that should be it. And again, I want to make some concluding remarks to remember what this talk was about. The most important thing is that groundwater assessment and monitoring are both key elements to achieve groundwater management, because the assessment of groundwater is something that you can do once, but you cannot stop there because the resources are changing. So that's why you need to monitor it with a certain frequency. When you design a monitoring network, there are things that you have to consider, which are the purpose, the variables, the design of the network, and how you are going to manage the data. Regarding global resources, there is not enough information about the state and trends of groundwater resources, and that's why that we are trying to help with that with our DGMN program, to create awareness, share knowledge, and improve the quality and accessibility of groundwater monitoring data. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Arnaud.
Claudia. Yeah, thank you very much for your great presentation. There was a question in the chat on the whether the copies of the presentations can be shared, and yes, we'll share everything after the course. I don't know yet how we'll do that, but we have your email addresses from the registration, so we'll let you know how and where to get the presentations, but everything will be shared. No worry. I will follow up, continue with a presentation on borehole data. If you have questions for Claudia, please keep them for later. There will be a session for questions and answers. On borehole data collection, Claudia addressed the monitoring data, and I will talk about the borehole data. The borehole data are any data you can collect during the siting, the drilling, and the testing of a new borehole. So when you drill a new borehole, you don't drill anywhere randomly. Usually there is some preliminary study where you determine what's the best position for drilling your borehole. And you might collect some relevant data during this phase. Like for instance, you might use geophysical methods to characterize the subsurface and identify the best place to drill your borehole. So during that phase of siting, you might collect already some interesting data. Then the drilling itself, during the drilling, you can collect additional data, such as the samples from the rock you're drilling through, or the material, and so you can draw a little stratigraphic log, like depicted here on the slide, where you. Sorry, is there remote control? Sorry, yesterday someone was using a pointer. And I don't know how to do that.
We can see your mouse.
Which... Oh, you can see my mouse moving.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So you can see an example of a stratigraphic log here on the slide. So that's one sort of information. You can also collect the depth of the water strike. So whenever you meet a water bearing formation, if it's confined, you will see a water strike. You can collect the depth of the water table if it's an unconfined aquifer. So those are data you will be collecting during the drilling of the borehole. And then after the drilling, you will probably install some casing and some screen intervals, some material to build the borehole. You can also report on that, of course. And after the borehole has been drilled and installed and constructed, there is often a testing following that. And that will be taking a sample of the water to see if it's of good quality. So we'll have some water quality data, and there is also very often a pumping test where you test the pumping yield. You determine the pumping yield of your well. So there are different pumping tests available, but there also via the pumping test you can collect important data on the aquifer, like the permeability or the storativity. So those data, they are very relevant for groundwater characterization and groundwater assessment. Yeah, those are just some illustrations of what I just mentioned. Illustration of a borehole log with the stratigraphy and the design of the well, a water strike, a big one, and here some data from a pumping test where you measure the drawdown in the well while you're pumping water from the well. But I was saying that this information, the data you're collecting during the siting, the drilling, and the testing of a borehole is very relevant. It's very important because it gives you key information on the stratigraphy and on the productivity of the aquifers. If you are in complex environments, you want to know what are the different layers in the subsurface, where are the aquifers, how thick they are, at what depths, where are the confining aquifers, the aquithards. And there are indirect methods to figure that out, like geophysics, but there is nothing better than a direct observation via drilling and boreholes. So those information they will really form the basis for instance, making a hydrogeological map of a country, of a river basin, the cross sections. If you want to make a 3D hydrogeological model as well, you will need to know about the stratigraphy and about the properties of the different units. And a lot of those data will be collected during the siting, the drilling, and the testing of boreholes. And one thing that is important to keep in mind is that the stratigraphic log is not something you can collect afterwards, because once you have constructed the borehole, you have installed the casing, you have no access to the geology anymore. So this is something you need to measure and to record during or right after the drilling, not after the borehole is constructed, is installed. If you don't do it then, you cannot do it afterwards. So the data is lost. And if you want to have a direct observation of the geology, we'll have to drill again, which is a pity. So that's yeah, I said don't miss this opportunity, really. So all those data, you can turn them into different types of information. I mentioned hydrogeological maps, cross sections, models. They are very relevant for the groundwater sector in general, but for groundwater development in particular, for drillers, because whenever you want to drill a borehole, the first thing you will look at is the data from the existing boreholes nearby in the project area. So it's important that this data is collected, properly stored, and then shared with those who need it, like in that case, the drillers. And here is an example of the hydrogeological information system from the Quebec province in Canada, where virtually all the boreholes in the province have been recorded and made available in an online database. So as a driller or as a researcher or whatever, if you want to know about existing boreholes in some area, you can go to that system. Then you can define your project study area. There are different ways how to do that. And you will get a list of all the boreholes in the database with key information, key data about those boreholes. Of course, the location, the address, but also the diameter of the well, the depth of the well, the different stratigraphic units, data from the pumping tests, etc. So that's really a wealth of data, of information, if the things are done properly, if the data are collected, properly stored, and shared online. That's really a wealth of information that can help drillers to find good locations for new boreholes. So you're increasing the chances of success of new boreholes. So those data, they are collected by the drillers, those who are actually siting, drilling, and testing the borehole. They need to be collected by the responsible authority in a country. And that can be a department within the Ministry of Water, that can be the water authority, that can be some regional water authority, or a geological survey, whatever. But in virtually every country, there is a responsible authority to collect those data. So if this authority is commissioning the well, the borehole, if it's a public well, in principle, it's not too difficult to get the data back from the dealer, because it's managed by the department itself. Although we have there are cases where those data are not collected, but in general, it's quite it's not too challenging to collect those data. It is more challenging to collect the borehole data when the borehole is private, when it's sited, drilled, tested by externally. So in that case, you need to have a strategy to collect the data. Now, in many countries, new boreholes have to be registered. There is a regulation because it's important for the responsible authority to know how many boreholes are drilled. Sometimes you need to apply for a permit, for a license to drill and to pump groundwater. This is a way to control the abstraction in a country. Directly, if you are really specifying how much the people can pump and assigning permits, or indirectly, when you at least you know where new boreholes have been drilled, that gives you an idea of how much groundwater is abstracted in the country. So there are those regulations, and through those regulations, whenever a new borehole is registered, there is a possibility that data is shared with the responsible authority. So whenever you applied for registration, you register a borehole as a private well owner, you will need to share some data about the borehole. And this depends on the countries, but you always need to share the location and the address. Very often you need to specify what, yeah, if it's a borehole, sometimes it can be something else. It can be like a handle well, or you need to give information on the purpose of the well, if it's for domestic purpose, if it's for irrigation, and information about the pump, about the yield of the borehole. But yeah, this varies between the countries. So via those regulations, there is a possibility for the responsible authority to collect relevant data from the siting, drilling and testing of new boreholes. The problem is that it's difficult to enforce such regulation, because how do you make sure, how do you know if the people comply or not? I mean, during the drilling, it's easy to spot a drilling machine, but once the borehole is there, it outcrops very slightly above the ground surface. So it's not something you will notice easily if there are new boreholes. So it's difficult to check whether the boreholes have been registered or not. And for example, in Flanders, they have estimated that Flanders is a province, the northern province in Belgium. It is estimated that 10 to 20% of the boreholes are illegal, and illegal means that they are not registered, or they are registered but the people are abstracting more than they declared. And that's an issue. They have issues with droughts, in particular over the last few decades in Flanders. So availability of groundwater is really an issue, and they want to, well, they need to be very strict on the abstraction, and so they need the regulation to be enforced. But for that, they acknowledge that they would need more people, more capacity to control the groundwater abstraction in the countries, and send inspectors to check whether the boreholes have been registered or not. The same situation in Spain, but it's more dramatic because it is estimated that what was that? I don't remember the exact figure, but there is a huge amount of groundwater that is abstracted illegally. It's more than half of groundwater abstraction is illegal. And recently, the government, or the regional government in Spain, have taken action to solve this problem. So they are inspecting, checking if the people have declared for the boreholes, and if not, well, they can give fine to the people. Well, in that case, they are not checking the private, what do you say, the boreholes for domestic use, because in general the abstraction rates are not so high, but they are targeting industries in particular. And here in Spain, the agricultural sector, which is abstracting a lot of groundwater. And recently there was also a case of an important wetland in southern Spain. And this wetland depends on groundwater. It's a groundwater depending wetland ecosystem with significant wildlife and etc. The problem is that there is a lot of abstraction, illegal abstraction near that wetland, and because of that, the water level is depleting, and the entire ecosystem is at risk. So and recently the EU Commission has taken Spain to the European Court of Justice and telling them that they really need to take action to protect that ecosystem, and that means spotting and fighting illegal abstraction. So I won't talk more about those regulations because Dr. Caliste will give a presentation on regulations tomorrow. But just so you know about the challenges of collecting, of registering borehole and collecting the data from private boreholes. Just to finish on that, there are other ways, of course. So you need to check whether the boreholes are legal, illegal. You can give fine to the people who don't abide. But there are also other things you can do to promote the collection of borehole data. And one is to provide easy forms to be filled in to collect the data. You can also provide those forms online, or let the drillers or the well owners to fill in the forms online, so that the data are directly sent to the responsible authority. This is in order to ease the process for the private borehole owners and drillers. Well, it might be that people don't register the borehole because, well, they don't want to pay a fee. So there also, you need to, as a responsible authority, you will need to determine what is the best fee to be collected. But again, what I think is very good incentive to motivate the people to share borehole data is to then make those borehole data available online. Because for a driller, for instance, it might not be so, let's say, they might not be enthusiastic to share borehole data with the government if then it's so difficult for them to get the data back or to get data whenever they need to drill a new borehole. But if, like in Quebec, you make those data available online easily for free and to all, then that would be a very good incentive for the people to share the data, because they know that they contribute to a good database that they can use afterwards for drilling better boreholes. So yeah, this is about borehole data. Christina, Claudia, I didn't check the time while I was talking, but for the next presentation, let me know if I'm speaking for too long. But for now, I think we are on time. I'm moving to the next presentation, which is which is on groundwater data management. Groundwater data management, because we've talked about the collection of data, but then what do you do with the data afterward within the responsible authority? By groundwater data management, we mean the entire process of using groundwater data after they have been collected. So that means quality assurance and quality control to make sure that the data that you collect or that have been collected are of good quality. We mean the storage of data in archives or in databases. We mean the sharing of data with other stakeholders, with the large public, making those data accessible. We mean, of course, the analysis and the interpretation of the data, so that the data you've collected is finally turned into some meaningful information that you can use to inform groundwater management. So all those important aspects are encompassed under the term of groundwater data management. And this is this presentation is about groundwater data management. We had the chance to get a lot of insight on groundwater data management in the SADC region in Southern Africa a few years ago, we had the chance to collaborate with the SADC Groundwater Management Institute to evaluate the state of groundwater data collection and data management in the SADC member states. This was a very important assignment to define subsequent capacity building activities to improve the state of groundwater data collection and data management, and to get that to evaluate the state of groundwater data collection and data management. We carried out a lot of interviews with professionals from the groundwater sector in the member states. Of course, people from the water department, which is in many member states the responsible authority in charge of groundwater assessment, groundwater management. So they are the ones in charge of collecting the data and managing the data. So as you could see, we met a lot of people from those water departments, but we also met people from other departments, from other ministries, like for instance, the Ministry of Environment, who often they also deal a bit with groundwater. We interviewed people from water companies. Of course, there are water companies when they use groundwater for public water supply. We met with researchers from universities, private consultants and drillers, and also people from NGOs and other non-governmental organizations. In total, we were able to meet with 145 groundwater professionals in 12 member states. There are just three member states who didn't take part to this project. And so we interviewed those people we carried out semi-structured interviews, asked a lot of questions about data, how data is collected, how data is managed, or is it easily accessible, and etc. On top of that, we also get the input from 22 young professionals from the member states who help us to collect some missing information. So yeah, this was this is a bit the structure of the report we wrote to share the outcomes of this study. This is a map with the different activities we carried out to make this assignment, where the good participation of the countries in dark green, less good participation from the countries in light green. But eventually we were able to write an extensive report on the state of groundwater data collection and management in the member states. And in that report, we wrote country reviews, a piece of information for every country, but also a summary table where we try to summarize the information at the SADC level and compare the situation in the different countries. And so there were, of course, there were differences between the countries because, well, there are differences in incomes in different countries. Some national water authorities have more capacity than in other countries. And also there was a difference between countries where groundwater is very relevant, mostly the dry countries where there is little surface water available, and countries where there is a lot of surface water available in general that tend to care a bit less about groundwater. So there were discrepancies, there were differences between the countries, but there were also a lot of gaps they had in common, a lot of things they had in common. So we have identified those gaps in groundwater data collection and management. And the main gap was budget. There was not enough money and budget available for groundwater data collection and management activities, which translates into insufficient human capacity. There's not enough staff, or staff that is not sufficiently trained on groundwater data collection and management. And there was insufficient equipment and material like piezometers, sampling sets, labs, infrastructure, computers, transport to visit the wells, IT infrastructure. I mean, all those activities, the collection of groundwater data like monitoring and the management of the data asks for a lot of equipment and material. So that was a main gap. But there was more than that. There were other gaps that were not directly related to the lack of budget. For instance, we figured out that in many countries there was not a dedicated an official plan for groundwater data collection. Like those activities were carried out like this without really following a plan or a strategy. So there was no numbered objective and no dedicated budgets. They would do things when money would be available, but it was not properly organized. And that's really a very important gap. Because if you do monitoring without a purpose, like Claudia said before, probably it won't deliver any meaningful results. In fact, there was some time ago a brief from Groundwater Mate that was a project from World Bank and several partners where different briefs were written on groundwater management, and they're available for free online. I provided the URL, the address here. You can download all the material from Groundwater Mate, and I strongly advise you to have a look because they are short, they are very clearly written, and really they provide like I say, a good summary of what you need to know about groundwater management. And there was a brief a report on groundwater monitoring, and they said two key requirements. And the first one is that it should be driven by a specific objective. Monitoring for its own sake often leads to inefficient use of manpower and budgets, and that's really what we noticed during the interviews with the people from the groundwater sector, that there was not really a clear objective and dedicated budget. With the result that there were the monitoring, for instance, was highly irregular. So during 1 year there would be a budget to go, so they would go, and the year after there won't be budget anymore, so they would not collect any data during this year, and so you get in the end data but which are not consistent, which are not continuous, so they're very difficult to analyze and to interpret. Another gap was there was insufficient interpretation of the data. In all countries, there were some data was collected. Like I said, in some countries there were a lot of data was being collected. Some other countries, very little data was collected, but in all countries there was at least something. But we found out that in many countries there was not sufficient interpretation, that those data were not used for anything. And so of course you could say, okay, I'm not doing any interpretation because I don't have enough data, but you might also see it otherwise. Maybe there is no data because there is no interpretation following. So that's a problem. The data should be collected for a specific purpose. So before collecting the data, you should know what you will do with the data. And we found out that this was often missing. And there were also issues, lack of software programs to interpret the data, lack of training to use the programs, and etc. Issues with quality assurance and quality control. Very often the data were not of good quality. But more importantly, in many cases, it wasn't clear if the data were of good quality or not, because there was nothing to ascertain whether the quality were good, the data were good or not. And some countries were using dedicated field forms and templates and following dedicated protocols and guidelines to collect the data and then to store the data in the office. but some countries were not doing that, and that's an issue. And then data storage and sharing. Very often, the data were not stored in proper databases, like relational databases. Very often the data were stored as hard copies in the offices or in Excel files. And Excel in itself is not a problem, but it has to be properly used. I mean, you have to be very thorough and very consistent with how you store the data in Excel. But unfortunately, we found out that in many countries, the data were in different Excel files, in different computers, sometimes in different offices. So there was not, like a centralized database where all data would be stored in a consistent way. With also the issue that in many countries, there was no backup strategy. So yeah, you have the data in hard copy. If you lose the hard copy, you lose everything. And the same for Excel. It was just stored on one computer. If the computer crashes, you lose all the data which are stored on the computer. And I come back to this brief from Groundwater made. They say the second key requirement for groundwater monitoring is that the data collected should be systematically stored for future use. There are far too many cases of monitoring data being lost along the way. And that's really what we noticed in many countries. So that data storage is of course a barrier to data sharing. And I will talk in the next presentation more on data sharing, because eventually that's what matters for the RBOs, is to get hold on the data which are collected in the riparian states. So they need to know how the data, they need to have access to the data. That's first thing, but then they need to know how the data have been collected. The job must be properly done in the riparian states, otherwise the RBOs we have a tough time to get the data and to interpret the data, to do some groundwater assessment at the scale of the river basin. And then on top of that, in that same report, we also reported on some other issues like vandalism on monitoring wells, and I mean, whatever was reported during the interviews, we combined in that report. So I invite you to have a look. It's available online. I think I shared the link in a previous slide. Then we completed that study subsequently last year with a similar sort of assessment, but really specific on data storage and data sharing, where we really figure out in which countries where the data are stored, how they are stored, how they are made accessible, and everything. And this report is also available online, I think. So while we did all those activities, all this assessment of groundwater data collection and data management, we did that as a basis for capacity building. Before implementing capacity building activities, you need to know what are the key issues, what needs to be addressed. So that's first reason. The second reason is that with static GMI, we want to improve the access to data and the sharing of data regionally at the regional level. And to do that, we couldn't collect the data ourselves. And the same for static GMI. The data are collected in the states, so we need the states to collaborate to make those data available. So it was very important for us to understand how those data are being collected and managed in the member states. And I think the same, I mean, what we did with static GMI, that's something that that lake and river basin organizations should also engage into, because they are in a similar situation. They themselves don't collect data directly, but they really need data in order to do groundwater assessment at the scale of the river basin. But I will come back to that later. We did a similar project last year in the 4 countries sharing the Senegal Mauritanian aquifer basin. So Senegal, Mauritania, Guinea-Bissau, and Gambia. And we did something similar, again, because we are supporting regional working group to foster the cooperation on groundwater resources management in the basin. And before defining any project activities, we needed to know what was the situation in terms of groundwater data collection and management. So we did something similar. We also wanted to engage with the countries to share the data available, that sort of thing. So a similar situation as what we had done in SADC with SADC GMI. The only thing is here we had few countries, but also because of COVID, we could not travel to the country. So we met groundwater professionals in virtual meetings, and there were less interviewees. So we were a bit less successful this time. But then, even though we could collect significant information on groundwater data collection and management, what's the status of groundwater monitoring, who are the responsible agencies for groundwater monitoring, for borehole data collection, what data are available and where, in what format. We also assess the availability of geological and hydrogeological maps, and etc. And eventually, we're also able to make a report with the main gaps in groundwater management, including groundwater data collection and management. So, like I said, I think it would be very relevant if lake and river basin organizations engage in that sort of assessment, because they will need the data, and the groundwater data, they are in the riparian states. So they need to know what data are available and where, and what is the quality of the data and everything. So, and this will be the basis for lake and river basin organizations to get the data and to make a groundwater assessment at the scale of the basin. But that would also be a basis for engaging with the riparian states in capacity building activities to improve the collection and management of groundwater data. So what would be the key questions to answer for lake and river basin organizations? First, to understand the responsibilities. Who does what? In many countries, like I said, there is a responsible authority. You need to figure out what is this responsible authority? Is it the Ministry of Water, a water authority, a geological survey? In some countries, the water management is decentralized, for instance, in Mozambique. So there is a department at the ministry, but the collection of data is with regional, subnational organizations. And in many countries, even though you have a responsible authority, additional data is being collected by other stakeholders. That can be other ministries, like I said, very often the Ministry of Environment, or that can be the Ministry of Agriculture. They also sometimes collect groundwater data. Water companies, they normally hold data on groundwater in the well fields they manage. Universities, NGOs, private companies, many stakeholders could have significant groundwater data that is important for the river basin organizations to collect. And it might not be that easy to figure out who does what in every country. So that's the first question to answer. The next question is, what data is available? Yeah, focusing, of course, on monitoring data. Is there groundwater level monitoring? Is there also monitoring of groundwater quality? If yes, what parameters? Is it also only salinity, temperature, or is it also they're also collecting specific ions, elements, bacteriological parameters? Is there any sort of groundwater abstraction monitoring? How many data points are being monitored, and what's the frequency of monitoring? What Claudia presented before, basically. You need to know how this groundwater monitoring is going on in the riparian states. And in case of borehole data, what data are being collected? Is it only the location of the borehole, or is there also information about the pumping test? this needs to be clear. And also, is the inventory up to date? Like I said, it's not easy for the states to collect those data. So we must have an idea of whether the inventory of borehole is up to date or not, or if it's incomplete. What is the quality of data? That relates to quality assurance and quality control, because eventually you will be using the data to do some groundwater assessment over the lake or river basin. So you need, before using the data, you need to make sure that the data are reliable. Then in what format is the data stored? Is it in hard copy? That sort of worst case scenario, or is it in Excel? Or do they maybe have a more advanced database like Access, or even a server-based database? That's best. So this is something to be figured out. And under which conditions are the data shared? Is there a dedicated data sharing platform? Is this to request or to pay something to get the data? Is there a data management strategy, etc., etc. So it's when we did this project in SADC and then in the Senegal or Mauritanian aquifer basin, we thought it would be enough at first to look into policy documents, because very often there are policy documents saying that, yeah, groundwater shall be monitored, and sometimes providing some information, but very often such documents were not available. There was, like I said, no plans, no strategy. And when there was, very often we saw that there was a discrepancy between what the official document was saying and what was actually happening in reality. So really the best way to get insight on groundwater data collection and management is really to ask the people who are dealing every day with those things. So people in the ministries, or drillers, or universities, or other stakeholders. So this approach to carry out interviews with groundwater professionals, I really think it's the best approach. And also, we found out that the situation was in some countries changing quite rapidly, depending, for instance, on political changes. There is a change of governments, so different priorities, different budgets also. Like new government might cut or increase the budgets for groundwater data collection and management, or there might be a project, or like with international donors, which might improve the situation. So the situation is changing quite rapidly. So it's important to have an up-to-date view of the situation. Based on that, on the assessment of groundwater data collection and management in SADC, we developed a framework for groundwater data collection and management. So phase one was to assess the situation, and phase two was to implement capacity building activities, like workshops, like investments in infrastructure, like piezometers, like lab facilities, like software tools, and etc. But we also gathered all good practices and advices and recommendations to properly organize the collection and the management of groundwater data into a document, into that framework, which is also available online. I hope I provide no, there is no link, but you can Google it and you will find it very easily. So that's a very nice document, very recent, with guidance on how to organize the groundwater data collection and management, and you can use it as a basis for implementing any sort of capacity building activity with the riparian states. But on top of that, there are also a lot of many other documents and providing guidance on monitoring, on data management, and etc. I provided here a few references that you can use and which might be helpful. And this is just a subset. There's still much more available online. So to conclude this presentation on groundwater data management, we think that lake and river basin organizations, they should have insight on groundwater data collection and management in the riparian states because, well, they need the data. So we'll talk about data sharing in the next presentation. So they will need the data. So, but they also need to know how the data are being produced in the riparian states. I think that's very relevant for them. And what we also found is that there is definitely a value in transboundary cooperation for capacity building and groundwater assessment and management, including groundwater data collection and management. We've looked at what's been done in the SADC region with the Groundwater Management Institute, which is this regional institution to promote the management of groundwater resources. And really, it's instrumental to have to work with different countries to put forces together in order to attract funding, to share experience between countries and good practices, also to make economies of scale when it comes to trainings. Of course, you can do it on your own in one country, but you can merge forces and organize trainings for multiple countries together. Also invest in some IT infrastructure. So there is certainly value in transboundary cooperation. And like the Groundwater Management Institute was instrumental in the SADC region, we think that lake and river basin organizations could be instrumental with the riparian states to improve the state of groundwater data collection and management. So that's the end of this presentation. What time is it, Christina? 10:30.
It's past, so bang on time.
Is it? Am I right on time or?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Okay. Okay. Then again, another presentation for me on groundwater data sharing. Just a second. I need to open the next PowerPoint presentation. Yep. Can you see the presentation?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, this presentation is specific on data sharing, which is a part of groundwater data management. But because it's so important for the RBOs, because that's what matters in the end, is that they get access to the data, we wanted to give it a prominent space in this course. So this presentation is only about groundwater data sharing. Why is it so important? Well, this has been covered already by my colleagues, but if you want to address groundwater management at the lake or river basin organization level, you will need information, you will need an assessment of groundwater resources at the lake and river basin organization level. And that information is not available like this. Someone has to do it. Someone has to produce this information. For instance, it would be a starting point to have a hydrogeological map at the scale of the basin. And this is not available. What is available very often is a hydrogeological map of the riparian states. So here you have an example of the hydrogeological map of Namibia and a hydrogeological map of South Africa, maybe not all South Africa, just one province. But anyway, imagine you have those two hydrogeological maps. You cannot simply cut and paste the two hydrogeological maps because they don't show exactly the same thing. They're not at the same scale. They're not using the same color scheme. So there are really two things you cannot merge together. It's not as simple as that. You will need to start from scratch to make a new hydrogeological map at the scale of the basin. And for that, you will need access to the original data. So really, it doesn't mean that you cannot collect the hydrogeological maps from the states. Of course not. It's very important that you have access to the information, but you also need access to the data, so you can reinterpret the data at the scale of the basin. And on top of that, one advantage of data sharing is that data is independent of the context. Unlike information, they are unbiased. Like whenever you make information, well, the information is made by the hydrogeologist, uses the data and turns it into information. There is it's a bit subjective. So if you start from scratch from the raw data, you can really come to a new assessment. So that's another advantage of having access to the raw data. You can cross-check the information that has been provided previously. So yeah, but that's this has been covered already. So so yeah, it's important that lake and river basin organizations get access to the information and to the data from the riparian states and the other stakeholders. The relevance of information sharing has been recognized for a long time. Already in '92, in the Rio Declaration, it was written that in Article 10 that at the national level, each individual shall have appropriate access to information on the environment. And that, of course, includes information on groundwater resources. And further, it says that the state shall facilitate and encourage public awareness and participation by making information widely available. It's also, I mean, the relevance of data and information sharing is also recognized in other policy documents. For instance, in the SADC regional water policy. But you've seen before, we explained that there is a difference between data and information. Although we often use the two as synonyms, including myself, there are different things. And what is not clear in those policy documents is that very often they are about information sharing. They don't mention data sharing specifically. I think in the SADC regional water policy at some point, data were mentioned, but very often it's about information sharing. And it's not clear to me if that information includes also the sharing of data or if it's just the sharing of information. But for us at IGRAC and for the SADC Groundwater Management Institute and for lake and river basin organizations, it's very important that the sharing includes data and not only information. So recognizing the relevance of data and information sharing, a lot of countries have developed tools to make this data and information available, like online platforms and dashboards, cell phone apps, and etc. Here you have an example of the National Groundwater Archive in South Africa, where you can log in and then access to the groundwater data. But in many countries in Africa, the sharing of data, of groundwater data and information is not going on properly. There are some gaps in many countries. You don't have access to the data directly. You need to request the data. You need to send a request to the responsible authority. Sometimes you will need to pay to get the data. You might need to wait a couple of days, sometimes a couple of weeks before getting an answer. And it might be that in the end, the answer is there is no data because you didn't know beforehand if data would be available or not. So you're losing a lot of time. That's really not the way forward. And this is something we notice in several countries during the assessments we made in SADC and then later on in the Senegal or Mauritanian aquifer basin. So a few years ago, there was a project on groundwater governance where well, the the status of groundwater governance was investigated worldwide. And based on the findings, they made some recommendations, which they included gathered in a vision for 2030. And in that vision, it's written that all major aquifers systems are properly assessed, and the resulting information and knowledge is available and shared, making use of up-to-date information and communication techniques. That means that, yeah, there is still a long way to go in many parts of the world to improve that. Although the sharing of information and data has long been recognized, there are still countries lagging behind. Our experience is at IGRAC, we've quite a long experience with groundwater data sharing, because it's one of our core activities. IGRAC was born in part to improve the access of groundwater data and groundwater information worldwide. So IGRAC created a system to facilitate and promote the sharing of groundwater data information, and that is the Global Groundwater Information System, the GGIS, which was created in 2008 or maybe 2004 already, but anyway, long before I came to IGRAC, and then the system has evolved over the years. So we still have this Global Groundwater Information System that has been until now the system for sharing maps and also documents. And we also had, the Global Groundwater Monitoring Network platform, which was a system specific for a specific system for sharing groundwater monitoring data. But like my colleague Claudia showed in a presentation, we have been able in the new version of the GGIS to include also global monitoring data. So now the two systems are as one, but I will come back to that later. So with this GGIS, we are able to create different map viewers to share groundwater data and information. And we had the chance to support a few organizations and projects in Africa to facilitate and to promote the sharing of data and information, creating dedicated map viewers for those organizations, for those projects. So we'll talk about the SADC groundwater management, groundwater information system that we developed a few years ago for the SADC Groundwater Management Institute. We also created a GGIS viewer for the Stampriet aquifer system as part of the first phase of the Greta project. And we also used the GGIS to create the Ramotso information management system as part of a project on the Ramotso aquifer, which is a small transboundary aquifer across Botswana and South Africa. So yeah, I will explain those three activities, and that will give you an idea of how groundwater data sharing can be promoted in a transboundary context in Africa. The SADC Groundwater Information Portal was born in 2010, though it wasn't called like that. But in 2010, there was a project to develop a hydrogeological map of the entire SADC region. So they collect all data information available in the member states and harmonize the data and produced a new set of maps on groundwater resources over the region. And in addition to the set of maps, they prepared a harmonized database of boreholes in the SADC region. So that was a great project, great outcomes, and they made all the maps and the inventory of boreholes available online in a platform. The problem is that after a few years after the project, there was no budget anymore to maintain that platform, and so it crashed. Yeah, these were screenshots from the old system. But yeah, pity in 3 or 4 years later, the data, the platform was not available anymore, so the data could not be, and the maps could not be accessed. So when the SADC Groundwater Management Institute was created a few years ago, one of the first activities was to resuscitate this set of maps and this inventory of boreholes and to make it available online again. So we created in the GGIS a dedicated viewer for that. This is a screenshot of the viewer. So you would have on the left the list of map layers, including the borehole data. They were structured in different folders and subfolders, and then you could click on the layer. They would appear in the main map viewer. There were also there was a box showing the legend of the different layers. There was a section for the sharing of documents related to groundwater in the SADC region. And there was a public viewer accessible to anybody and a password protected viewer, which was accessible only to us and to the colleagues from SADC GMI, where they could handle say some sensitive data or data that were not ready yet to be shared publicly. And then 2 years ago, we had the chance to collaborate again with SADC GMI to expand the SADC Groundwater Information Portal. So we moved the SADC GIP out of the GIS and we created a new software. We moved it to a new software. So this is where you can access the new SADC Groundwater Information Portal. And again, it works as before. You have map viewers. You see the design is a bit different, but the idea is the same. You have the data available on the left. Then you can select the layer and they will appear in the main window. But there are some differences from the previous SADC GIP. The software on which the new SADC GIP is based is called GeoNode, and it is used to deploy a spatial data infrastructure. So the new SADC GIP is a spatial data infrastructure. And what it means is that everybody can register in the system and directly upload data and information into the system, which was not feasible in the previous system, in the old GGIS, where only a few administrators could upload data. So here, everybody can register and everybody can upload data. And what is very important is that when uploading data, the data providers decide who else can access the data, who else can visualize the data, who else can download the data. And you can also put licenses and restrictions on the data. So it's really, with a spatial data infrastructure, you see a lot of different users and organizations can use the system for their own purposes. And in fact, you can compare a spatial data infrastructure like a road infrastructure. We all use roads for different purposes, but we're not building each of us our own road for own purpose. You're using the same infrastructure. While a spatial data infrastructure works in the same way, there is one infrastructure that a lot of different users and organizations can use for sharing data. In that case, groundwater data. So with that, with this new SADC GIP, we really want to make the SADC GIP the infrastructure for groundwater data sharing in the region. So that can be used by the national authorities in the member states, but also by other organizations like other ministries, water companies, river basin organizations, universities, NGOs, and etc. Like I said, as a data provider, when you upload the data, you remain in full control of your data. You decide who else will be visualizing your data or downloading the data. You can put licenses, and here I put the example of the the Creative Commons licenses, which are for open data. That means that, for instance, you can make your data public, available to all, but you can decide how the people will be allowed to use your data. If you don't want them to make profits out of your data, you can specify a non-commercial license and don't allow them to use it for commercial purposes. Or if you want that the new product that will be made out of your data remains in the public domain, you can use the share alike. That means that, well, what will come out of your data will remain open and publicly available. So I think that's great. Sharing your data publicly doesn't mean that anybody can do anything with your data. You can specify that with licenses. The new SADC GIP as a spatial data infrastructure supports international standards for spatial data exchange, and that's also very important. That was also already the case of in the old SADC GIP, but that's very important that the data in the system can be exchanged with other systems, other platforms online, and vice versa. That in the SADC GIP, you can get data coming from other platforms. And this is only possible if the data on different platforms follow some standards. So there is the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is a consortium with hundreds of organizations dealing with spatial data. And their job is to agree on standards and protocols for ensuring the interoperability of geospatial data and tools. And so this is the case with the SADC GIP. It can communicate very easily with other platforms, whereby data and like map layers from other platforms can be moved to the SADC GIP, and vice versa. Data from the SADC GIP can be accessible in other platforms. And here I just showed a few examples, like the spatial data platform from Malawi, the FAO map catalog, and the GIS server from Orascom, the Orange Senku River Commission, who have developed it recently, also a platform for sharing data and information. And then, as a spatial data infrastructure, it supports extensive metadata, and that's also very important. Whenever you share data, that you share not only the data, but also metadata, where you explain to other people what the data is about. Explain what's the coordinate system, what are the units. If you say water level is 5, is it 5 meters, 5 feet? Is it depth from the surface elevation? Is it depth from the top of the borehole? How the depth of the water table was measured? Is it with a deep meter? Is it with a logger or whatever? So there is a lot to tell about the data and the information you share, and this is those are the metadata. It's very crucial to be shared, in particular when you're sharing data in a transboundary context, because we can assume that within your organization you're using the same standards. You know what the data is about. But if you share data with other organizations, and if those organizations are in another country, then there is a high chance that they're using different standards and different methodologies, and so they might misinterpret the data that you are sharing. And this is an example from the we have a few years ago collected what we think would be the necessary metadata to be shared along with monitoring data. And this is an example from that borehole, that harmonized borehole inventory of the SADC region. this is an example of borehole in that database. And if you look at at the distribution of the borehole, it's highly dubious. So what would be interesting in that case is to know how the location of the borehole has been measured, has been recorded. But unfortunately, this metadata was not made available. So yeah, here you have a problem, but you don't know exactly what's the problem. So yeah, metadata, very important. So that's the in a nutshell, the new static GIP system we made for static GMI, Static Groundwater Management Institute, and on top of that, as part of the project, we put together a lot of training material. We organized a lot of workshops to spread the word and let the people know in the region about the new system, because you might have a good system. If nobody is aware of the system and people don't know how to use the system, it will be useless. So yeah, for more information on the static groundwater information portal, just go have a look. It's static GIP.org, and you will find also all that training material that we proposed, including also a nice video to promote the static GIP. Another example of groundwater data sharing with GIS was in the Stampede transboundary aquifer system. We contributed to the phase one of the project, and we supported the sharing, the collection and the sharing of data and information in the aquifer system. And for that, we had made a GIS viewer available. So I showed already how the viewer were working, so I'm not talking anymore on that. But what is important is that in the second phase of the data project, the multi-country cooperation mechanism of the Stampede transboundary aquifer system was integrated into ORASOCOM in the Groundwater Hydrology Committee. So that's what we were saying yesterday. There was first a focus on the transboundary aquifer, a good opportunity to get the riparian states to cooperate, to collaborate on groundwater assessment, and then it can move to the review basin organization, because there is obviously a synergy between the job being done at the transboundary aquifer level and the job being done at the river basin organization level. So now, what regards the assessment and the management of the aquifer system is at ORASOCOM. And the nice thing is that I think in 2018, ORASOCOM launched a new information management system. So all the data that were previously in the GGS viewer moved to the to this new system for data and information sharing in the river basin. And the nice thing is that this ORASOCOM GIS server is based on the same software as the static GIP. It's also based on GeoNode. So it has the same capabilities, the same functionalities. And the nice thing is that the two systems can communicate together. So data from the static GIP can be made available in the ORASOCOM system, and data from the ORASOCOM system can be made available in the static GIP. And then the third and last example was in the Ramotswa project. So the Ramotswa is a small transboundary aquifer shared between South Africa and Botswana. It is small, but it's close to Gaborone, the capital of Botswana. So it's quite an important aquifer, quite strategic one. And the project was a project on transboundary groundwater assessment. And so we made GGS viewer available to support the collection and the sharing of data, and we support we gathered all the data from the different countries and different organizations and stakeholders. It's 11. Let me just finish with this example, then we'll split for a break and I will finish this presentation after the break. I'm just finishing this example. That's what we did back in 2015. And then 2 years ago, LIMCOM launched its first groundwater committee. So LIMCOM is the Limpopo River Basin Commission, so dealing with surface water, but recently they decided to address also groundwater, the conjunctive management of surface water and groundwater resources. So with this groundwater committee, they want to focus on the 3 transboundary aquifers which have been identified so far in the basin. That's the Limpopo aquifer, the Tulikaru aquifer, and also the Ramotswa aquifer. So I think for LIMCOM, it's not only the TBAs are relevant, but I assume it's just the first step. First, they will address conjunctive management in those TBAs and then extend it to the entire, to groundwater over the entire basin. But so now they're interested in those 3 transboundary aquifers, including the Ramotswa aquifer. And the problem is that LIMCOM has little capacity to do that. So they sign a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with SADC-GMI, which is this regional institution to promote the assessment and the management of groundwater in the SADC region. And so they are receiving the support of SADC-GMI to address those groundwater issues at LIMCOM. And as part of that, the data that were in the Ramotswa information management system that we had collected, they have moved to the SADC Groundwater Information Portal. So they are also available in the SADC Groundwater Information Portal. So yeah, let's stop here. Those were 3 examples of transboundary groundwater data sharing in Africa. And after the break, we'll split for 30 minutes. After the break, I will continue with a presentation on the new GGIS, also including the sharing of monitoring and borehole data. Is there anything else, Christina?
No, I think that's everything.
Okay, great.
Just that we'll return in half an hour.
Yeah, and thank you already for your attention, and we resume the course in 30 minutes. See you later.
Music protection, my Bible says, go call again. No sure. Still, sir. It's not ceremony.
Yes.
Shall we continue? Christina, I think it's time. Are you hearing me, Christina? Shall we continue?
Yes, I think that's 9:30 now.
Okay, yeah. So I hope you had a good break. So just let me 15 minutes to finish this presentation on groundwater data sharing in transboundary context. I showed you 3 examples of transboundary groundwater data sharing in Africa. Those were examples where we were involved using the global groundwater information system. And then those initiatives have evolved into different platforms, which is great in a sense because it's not all rule to do the job of other organizations in terms of groundwater data sharing. The objective is that each organization becomes autonomous. So we're very happy with that. But in the meantime, we continue developing, maintaining, and using the global groundwater information system for other projects in other parts of Africa, in other parts of the world. And the nice thing is that we have considerably upgraded the GGIS in earlier this year. And so you can access the new GGIS at this address, ggis.unigrac.org. And it is structured in multiple thematic viewers. This is similar to the previous version. We still have different viewers, like on transboundary aquifers of the world, like the map portal, on a different projects. This is an example of a map viewer containing the TBA map of the world. And you see it's like in the previous version, you have layer 3 on the left, where you can select the layers. They will appear on the main map. And you might have recognized already the design of GeoNode, which is the software we used to develop the static GIP that Orascom is also using. And indeed, we've used that same software to upgrade the GGIS. So the GGIS, like the static GIP, like the Orascom viewer, like many other platforms based on GeoNode, work as a spatial data infrastructure. And the only difference, and that's big difference, is that we have complemented the basic GeoNode software with some customized software development to integrate well and monitoring data, because GeoNode is to deploy a spatial data infrastructure. And of course, the groundwater data, the groundwater information we're dealing with is, as always, almost always a spatial component. If not, you can share them as documents. But all data, some of our data have an additional component, like well data, borehole data. They have a Z component, a vertical component, which is not easily supported in GeoNode. And monitoring data have a time component, which is also not easily or readily supported in GeoNode. So we wanted a system where we could share the maps, but also those well and monitoring data, which until now we had been sharing in a separated platform. We wanted everything at the same place. So we invested in customized development to have that. Now, this new GGIS is, of course, free and free to use for everybody. Everybody can use it. Also the section with well and monitoring data. But that development, we make it open source and free to share. Because GeoNode is already a free and open source software, we really understand the value of free and open source softwares. We saved some money and some time by using a software like GeoNode that was readily available. And we are very happy if the investment we made into this well and monitoring data section can be used by other organizations. So yeah, there are two ways you could use that new development. It's either by using directly the well and monitoring data in the GGIS, or by replicating this development into your own system. And what we need to do now in the next months, in the next years, is to see how, if we go for the first option, like storing well and monitoring data in the GGIS, to see how those data could be made available in a system like the SADC GIP or like the Horizon computer or other systems, and because those data they can be made available elsewhere. So the data can be stored in the GGIS or shared in the GGIS and then shared in other platforms. That's the beauty of data exchange protocols across different platforms. So Claudia already shared screenshots of the new system. So those are the monitoring data we have in the system. We have the data points on the map, and then if you click on a point, you will see the time series in the attribute box. And if you want to discover more, you can go to the well and monitoring data section, where you will find the monitoring data, but also additional data on the well, like drilling and construction, including the stratigraphy log, data about the hydrogeological properties of the layers crossed by the borehole, data about the management, and etc. And like other data in the GGIS, and like in the SADC GIP, for instance, whenever you share borehole data or monitoring data in the GGIS, you remain in control of the data. You decide who else can visualize, edit, download the data that you upload. Yeah, this is a figure summarizing the functionalities, but I think you're well aware now about GeoNode, about spatial data infrastructure. The main difference is that the GGIS combines spatial data infrastructure, and on top of that, it has a section for sharing well and monitoring data. We still have, we do have some viewers with information on groundwater resources in Africa. For the moment, we're working on two viewers, one for the project in the Senegal Martin Aquifer Basin, which I mentioned earlier. I told you we had been interviewing groundwater professionals in the 4 countries sharing the basin to see what was the state of groundwater data and collection and groundwater governance in the countries. We're also working on groundwater data sharing and groundwater information sharing in the basin. For that, we developed that map viewer. You have the address here if you want to have a look. And we have also a viewer for information at the scale of the African continent, which is available there, which also contains some interesting maps. Also, and that's a nice thing. You will see here, for instance, some continental maps that were developed by the colleagues from the British Geological Survey. It also contains national geological and hydrogeological maps, simplified maps that were made also by the colleagues from BGS. And this is the nice thing with the GGIS and with spatial data infrastructure in general, is that colleagues from other organizations can use it to upload their own material, and that material, they remain in full control of the data. So we're very happy with that. And for instance, you have data from from colleagues from BGS into the GIS. So I'm not developing more on the GIS. I think the best way, if you want to know more, is really to have a look. You have the address here, ggis.unigrac.org. And like we are using it for the Senegal-Mauritania aquifer basin, like we using it for at Africa, there is a potential for using it in other places, in other countries, also for lake and river basin organizations. For instance, like we did in, for instance, with the Stampede, with Ramotswa, or with the SADC-GIP, it is possible we can consider setting up a viewer for lake and river basin organization, provide some support to collect data, gather the data and the information, make it available in the GIS in a dedicated viewer until the lake or river basin organization gets the capacity or the budget to have their own system. But in the meantime, we are ready to assist with the GIS. So just to conclude this this presentation, which was long enough, some lessons learned. It is important to realize that the groundwater data sharing involves different organizations at different levels. So the organizations that are primarily the states, the National Water Authority, the Ministry of Water, the Geological Survey, but there are also other ministries, NGOs involved, research institutions, water companies, private consultants. Am I forgetting some organizations? Well, a lot of different organizations, different stakeholders holding or needing access to groundwater data and information. And at different levels, we have organizations active at the country level, but sometimes at the subnational level or the supranational level, like in like transboundary river basin organizations. So it's very important that groundwater data and information flow seamlessly across different platforms, and it's made available for those different organizations at those different levels. So with spatial data infrastructure, we can do that. First, you provide an infrastructure for different organizations to share data and information, different organizations at different levels, and the data and information can be made available across multiple platforms according to the needs. And with spatial data infrastructure, whoever provide data remains in control of data. That's very important. So there's no challenge with rights and ownership and anymore. No concern about that. You remain in control of your data. And the software we've used for the GIS, but also for the SADC-GIP, the software that's been used by Orascom is called GeoNode, but there are other software available. GeoNode and other software and some other software are free and open source. So that's a sort of infrastructure you can develop for, it's a reasonable investment. The software itself the code is for free. Then you probably need some IT specialists to make a server available and to deploy the infrastructure. You will also need some GIS and IT capacity within your organization to make sure it's used properly, to upload data, to support the people using the system. So I'm not saying it's easy. Something that everybody can do, but it's not as challenging as it could be in the past. It has become much easier to deploy spatial data infrastructure than in the past. And like I said, there is well, one thing is to deploy the infrastructure, and the other thing is to get the people to use the infrastructure. And that's very often the more challenging parts. Like you have the infrastructure, but then you need to encourage and to promote the use of the platform with your partners. So let's imagine as a lake and river basin organization, you deploy the infrastructure, then you need the states to share the data. So you will need to support them to advocate and to promote the use of the platform. Then you will need to push them to use it, help them to use it, because maybe they don't have the necessary IT capacities to use it. So our experience that it's a continuous effort to get data sharing going on. And with that respect, we find great value in regional institutions to support the data sharing of a region. Like, for instance, we really appreciate the role that the SADC Groundwater Management Institute played at the SADC level. And we think that other regional economic communities could follow that way in Africa, but also river basin organizations could play that role and support the riparian states in sharing data, groundwater data. We think that having those regional synergies is, well, first it helps, and it's also cost efficient. There is no point anymore that every country tries to achieve the same thing on its own, while you can put the capacities in common and achieve something together at the regional or at the RBO level. And like I said also before, like I mentioned, we at IGRAC and with the GGS, we also remain available to assist if necessary. Then there is quite some discussion going on in Africa and in some parts on the rules of protocols for lake and river basin organizations to implement data sharing with the riparian states, groundwater data sharing. But because people say, well, there is no sharing of groundwater data, and they say that specific protocols should be written and agreed upon to make that happen. Although there are very often protocols, existing protocols on water data in general. I mean, and surface water are being shared daily. So you would wonder why you need a specific protocol for groundwater data, because water data in general includes groundwater data. So is there really a need for an additional protocol on groundwater data sharing? I'm not sure about that. And our experience has shown that there is sometimes a good sharing of data without protocols. It's not necessary. What is necessary is that the states understand the value of sharing and are willing to share the data, and that there is a dialogue and a good cooperation between the different people. And in fact, recently, some colleagues published a study where they assess the state of data exchange in transboundary water, so including surface water, but also transboundary groundwater. And they found really no evidence that protocols improve the sharing of data. What really helps is the availability of online platforms promoting data exchange. And that's really in line with what we have observed so far in Africa and elsewhere. What could help, though, if we think in terms of policy, is something like the Inspire directive that was implemented in EU in the European Union over the last 15 years, where now the states are obliged to share the environmental data they have using, for instance, spatial data infrastructure. The EU wants to promote the flow of environmental data and information across organizations, across countries, so that data is always available to all, supporting environmental policies and applications. And thanks to this policy, we've seen great improvement of spatial data infrastructure software like GeoNode, the one we're using now. And we really see the data becoming more increasingly available to all publicly in all member states. So such a policy enforcing the sharing of data, groundwater data, but also any environmental data, we really think there is that could be helpful. But that's maybe beyond the control of river basin organizations. I don't know. So yeah, this was a presentation on groundwater data sharing. Hopefully, once groundwater data sharing is implemented, you get the data from the riparian states, and then you can start the job of harmonizing the data because they will come in different formats according to different standards and conventions. You need to harmonize the data, and then finally, eventually, you can really do the assessment of your groundwater resources within the lake and river basin organizations. And once you have done the assessment, you will identify data gaps, and then you can go back to the beginning go back to the states and to the beginning of groundwater data collection and management. That is saying, I need data there, and then you can revise and constantly improve your programs of groundwater data collection and management. Yeah, that's it. That's the end of this long presentation. So thank you for listening, and we can continue with the remaining of the program. And I think you're the next one, Christina, right?
Yes, I have quite a short presentation, and then I think we move on to some case studies. Yeah?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I will remember to share my screen this time. Is that okay there? You can see that now. Arnaud, is that?
I can see, yeah.
Okay.
There is raised hands,
okay.
Dr. Mohammed, but I propose we address that after your presentation. There will be time for question and answers.
That's fine. Yeah, we can come to questions after.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to speak very briefly, really, about human capacity and expertise within hydrogeology. So, as has been spoken quite a lot today and yesterday, data from the assessment and monitoring of groundwater needs to be translated into meaningful information for decision making. And this requires specific expertise in hydrogeology in order to do it. Groundwater experts are also necessary in the application of data and information in policymaking and decision making. And a range of organizations can really benefit from bringing on hydrogeologists to provide support over the understanding of groundwater resources, to assist in supervision of siting boreholes and drilling, and ultimately to manage and translate groundwater data into meaningful information. But many regions of the world, there's a gap in capacity and expertise. Often those who are in roles related to groundwater management don't have a technical background specifically in hydrogeology, and there's a gap in higher education within groundwater, so at the university level. Often when groundwater is included in course materials within universities, it's usually just a supplement to another topic such as environmental engineering or hydrology, and it's never the primary focus. Another issue is that when hydrogeologists are trained at the higher education level, these people tend to get hired into other sectors, even other countries. And they also tend to get promoted quite quickly, which leaves an expertise gap at the lower level and on the ground. So how can we increase capacity and expertise, particularly within Africa? Well, short-term options include workshops and training workshops like this one today, short courses, initiatives like training the trainers and vocational training. And actually, this has become even more possible within the last year in terms of logistics and costs, due to the kind of shift to a more virtual setups. However, ultimately, it's not a replacement for the technical higher education and professional training. So what about longer term? Well, ultimately, long term, we need to invest in groundwater specialists. And ideally, this should be through the development of hydrogeology focused education within universities within the region. Sometimes water professionals from lower income countries can be offered postgrad education abroad, but really the key thing here is that there needs to be jobs for them to return back to. There are options to study hydrogeology programs, distance learning and part-time, whilst being able to remain within a job. So this might be a more accessible option for quite a lot of people. And that way the expertise are retained within the country. So what about capacity within lakes and river basin organizations? Well, as has been said quite a lot, capacity is often limited. In general, due to the focus on surface water management as opposed to groundwater management. Although often hydrogeological work can be outsourced to contractors and consultants, but ultimately you still need groundwater specialists to, for example, write the terms of reference or to supervise the work, or actually once the results come back to implement the results and to understand what needs to be done on the technical level. And as my colleague Arnaud said in his last presentation, regional institutes can really support this, such as the SADC GMI Institute does with LIMCOM just now through the MOU that they established. Just a quick note to say that, next year is actually the theme of World Water Day is going to be groundwater. So there's a real opportunity to take advantage of this increase in awareness over groundwater that's going to be at the global level, and to build capacity through that within lake and river basin organizations. So, I mean, that's me, short and sweet, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add onto that, Arnaud. Otherwise we can move on to some case studies.
No, I think that was quite clear. It's a short presentation because there's not so much to say about that, but it doesn't mean it's not important. Actually, it's very important. We really think those are the two pieces of the puzzle. If you want to carry out groundwater assessment at the river basin organization level, you will need groundwater data, and we've presented a lot on that today. But you also need the people eventually to make sense of those groundwater data. Yeah, I think hiring a hydrogeologist, a groundwater expert in your organization, if you have the capacity, that's really a good investment. That's for sure. I don't know if because according to the program, we have some time for lake and river basin organizations to show a bit, to let us know about the ongoing activities related to groundwater assessment and groundwater management. We wanted this course to also be the opportunity for you to exchange and to inform the others on your activities. So we have some time today. We'll also have some time tomorrow for such presentations and for discussion. But but we also have time to discuss a bit all the things we've raised today. So I don't know if we shall start. Let's finish with the presentations for today. We'll have time for 1 or 2 presentations now from Lake and River Basin Organization, and the remaining time will be for question and answers. And then we'll raise your question, Dr. Muhammad. I assume it's the same you've written in the chat, but we will come to that later. So for now, I'd like to call. We have one representative from the Niger Basin Authority. Mr. Walter Olatunji will make a presentation on the groundwater activities at Niger Basin Authority. As a River Basin organization, if you also have some relevant information you want to share with the other participants, we can also give you the floor after or otherwise tomorrow morning, if you want to. But for now, yeah, we'll listen to Mr. Walter Olatunji. I will be sharing his presentation, so you just need to tell me next whenever I need to move to the next slide. Just let me open the presentation. Well, first,
yeah, good morning.
Good morning,
good morning,
Walter.
all.
Hello.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, very well. And on your side, can you see your presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
I can see it. Yeah.
Then I will mute myself. You just tell me next whenever I need to move to the next slide.
It's okay. Good.
The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. So quickly, I want to thank you for the opportunity given to MBA to air their view on groundwater management activities at the region level. So firstly, I would like to see the outline of the presentation that is in page 2. And the outline is talking about the overview of River Niger and NBA, status of groundwater management in NBA, the outline of AJAS projects, phase 1 to phase 3, and likewise the output, some challenges, some achievements in the project, lessons learned, and conclusion. Next slide, please. So what is the overview of River Niger? Next slide. The overview of River Niger. Why are we here? We are here because of River Niger. We want to holistically manage River Niger so that we can have all the associated benefits at all levels, from the upstream to downstream. So River Niger takes its source from Futajalon Plateau, which is about 1,000 meter altitude from the country called Guinea. And this river, emanated from Guinea, flowed through Mali, Niger, Benin, and downstream to Nigeria before it empties into the Atlantic Ocean. So if you look at the number, at the kilometer, the length is about 4,200 kilometers in length. That is River Niger. Considering that it is the 3rd largest river in Africa, after River Nile and River Congo. If you look at the basin catchment, is about 2.17 square kilometers in terms of area. And the active watershed, as I've said, is about 1,500 square kilometers. And don't forget, this river is managed by 9 countries. 9 countries are regarded as the riparian countries that are directly affected by River Niger. And these countries are Guinea, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. And if you look at the percentage of their allocation in the basin, Nigeria has the highest percentage of 33%, followed by Mali 26%, and also followed by Niger, which is 23%. These are the portion of the basin in members countries. And we cannot talk of River Niger without talking about River Benue. River Benue is one of the major tributaries of River Niger. But unfortunately, River Benue comes into River Niger at the downstream, which is at Nigeria. Then, why do we have NBA? What is the essence of NBA? Because this river is very important, it has direct impact on economic activities in the West Africa sub-region. It has impact on social activities there, agricultural activities, transportation. So the committee of member leaders in the region come together and create what is called Niger Basin Authority. That one came into force in 1980. But before 1980, there are some management aspects. We call it Niger River Commission. But effectively, in 1980, we have NBA come into existence to be able to manage this river and all the resources in the basin, and including the ecosystem. And to let you know, groundwater is accounting over 90% of safe water sources in the basin. But unfortunately, there is little or no more activities on groundwater management in the basin prior 60s and 80s at the region level. Next slide. Next slide. So what is the status? The status of the basin, the status of groundwater management in the basin. As I've said earlier, since the inception of NBA, groundwater activities, programs, and projects has been redundant. There is little or no activities at the regional level. There is more of surface water, that is River Niger and its tributaries. But we give kudos to the enactment of the NBA Water Charter and the Sustainable Development Action Plan and Investment Plan that bring out some activities that are related to groundwater management. And that brings us to the project that is called Groundwater Management in the Niger Basin, popularly known as AGIS. This project was formulated in line with the IWRM perspective or concept of NBA, which is enshrined in the Water Charter, that the basin should be actively managed, both surface water and groundwater, holistically, and the associated ecosystem. So AGIS come into line to be able to see how we can collectively manage groundwater in the basin. And likewise, we have another project that is called ITAS. ITAS is a project that is talking about improving the IWRM knowledge-based information with governance, so that we can also see how we can transfer knowledge on groundwater management, considering the interlinkage of groundwater and surface water. Now, we are not looking at the basin alone because there is a link in groundwater aquifers. So we are now looking at aquifers that are overlaid with those aquifers in the basin. That is, the Taudeni and Tenef. Taudeni and Tenef, they are from Mauritania and Algeria. So if you look at the project, ITAS is now expanding beyond the NBA member countries. Algeria and Mauritania are coming in because of the movement or transboundary aquifer water movement in those regions that interlink with the aquifer in NBA Basin. So the two projects are actually in principles of IWRM. And in this presentation, because of limited time, I will talk about AGIS project because it has started earlier before the ITAS project. Next slide. Next slide. Brief on the ITAS project. I will talk briefly about ITAS project because it came into line in 2018. And what are the goals that the ITAS project want to address? If you look at ITAS project, is talking about the IWRM knowledge base, because we have seen that little or no more information, there is little or no information about the implementation of integrated water resources management at the regional level. So ITAS project is now bringing the knowledge of IWRM to address surface water and groundwater interrelation. That is ITAS. And it has a four concepts or four components. The component one is the ITAS with the transboundary diagnostic analysis. The component two is community-based intervention. Component three is applying another method that is called, we call it test. It's a standard to reduce effluent or pollution in the river Niger. And likewise, we have the fourth component, which is cross-cutting issue that has to do with ecosystem and also the management of groundwater. Next slide. So we'll be talking now about a GIS project which has started earlier and has a lot of some achievement has been made and some lessons has been made. So what is AGIS project? As I've said earlier, is the project that is addressing the management of groundwater at the basin, that is regional level, where our pilot sites are in the members countries. The general activities in a short time is the collection and assessment of groundwater data, maps in the basin, and to develop a database system at regional level, and also helping them at the member country level. Likewise, we have identification of transboundary regions within conflict-ridden groundwater area. There are some area in the basin that has been earmarked as a problematic area in terms of groundwater. So we want to know how these issues are behaving or affecting the groundwater system and possibly the socio-economic activities in those areas. And the support for these measures of groundwater management in those areas mentioned and capacity building is also well detailed in AGIS project. Don't forget, capacity building is at all level, is about starting from regional level and to member countries, and also involve education, training, and technology transfer. Next slide. Next slide. As I've said earlier, AGIS project is in phases. It's in phases. We have phase 1, we have phase 2, we have phase 3. Currently, we are in phase 3 now. As I've said earlier, the AGIS project started in 2010. That is the phase 1, 2010 to 2013, phase 1. And at that time, the estimated budget for the project is 2.5 million euro, And location, as I've said, is the boundary part of Niger and Benin, Benin and Nigeria. Those are the project sites. And the activities that were employed or that have taken place in the phase 1, they are enumerated in the slide. Because of time, I will not be talking about those activities one after the other. But the major aspect of it is that inventory were made. Inventory on groundwater information were made in the basin. And also, we have a study on the transborder issues that is affecting groundwater in the basin. We have identification of priority of areas, as I mentioned earlier, those areas of interest. So we are also investigated. We also have the identification of institutional capacity, institutional arrangement in the basin. So all these activities mop up together to phase 1. Next slide. So the phase 2 project commenced in 2014 and ended in 2018 because it's a continuation of phase 1. Now, phase 2 now, it was able to also extend the project site to those areas that are not covered. Now they are we're able to cover Côte d'Ivoire in the project site. Côte d'Ivoire and Guinea were also covered in phase 2. Don't forget phase 1, we have the project site at Niger and Benin border portion and Benin and Nigeria border portion. Likewise, phase 2, we have the project site extended to Guinea border portion and also Côte d'Ivoire border portion. So all these areas were well investigated in terms of groundwater characteristics and what are the availability of data in those areas. And the budget at that time was also 2.5 million euro. And this was implemented between 2014 to 2018. Now we are in phase 3. Phase 3 is also a continuation of phase 2. And the budget in phase 3 is 2.2 million euro. And the location site is just like that of phase 2, because there are a lot of works, there are a lot of activities that are never been done before on groundwater at the regional level in the basin. So this project brings that opportunity to address all these groundwater issues. Next slide. Next slide. So we are looking at what are the benefits, the outputs from the AGIS project. We have seen that AGIS project has started since 2010 and is still ongoing, but there are some benefits, some outputs, some results has been realized in the basin, in the activities. So part of the outputs that has been realized, example I will give in Niamey. Before, it was a notion that Niamey, in the capital of Niger, there are 2 major aquifers. But because of AGIS project, we have discovered that the aquifers in Niamey, actually, there are 3. So we have the basement metalithal, that is the granite gneiss complex. We have the continental terminal, which is a sandstone formation. And we have the alluvial sand, which is also come into detection through the AGIS project. And all this information were not known before. It is a scientific study that has bring out more understanding on the behavior, occurrence, and characteristics of groundwater. We use groundwater every day, but we don't know exactly their behavior and their patterns. These are well discovered through this project. Another output or another information discovered is about groundwater pollution. Groundwater pollution. Before, we don't even understand that there's a relation in, for example, in Niamey, it was discovered that there is high bacterial load above 1,000 CFU per milligram in open dog wells. Because some dog wells are there, people are drinking them, they don't know the impact in their body system about the animals that are drinking from them. So the information that discovered from the AGIS discovered that this load is over 1,000 CFU in open dog well. Likewise, we're able to also discover that some wells were closed. Those wells that are closed, the loads are minimal. They are minimal, they are less than 100. So these are the information that actually affect our well-being. So likewise, about the bacteria and the human consumption, the bacterial relation to the human and animal origin, it was also discovered that most of this contamination, they are from men, from people around who use plastic cans that are dirty and put into the open well and fresh from the water and drink it. So most of this pollution are from the behavior of people living in those areas. Next slide. So you see that the AGIS being the first groundwater management in NBA, it has really opened a lot of scientific information for us to know. Like I said earlier, we have a lot of impacts through the project in the basin, not only at regional level, also at the member countries. There are a lot of information about groundwater that has been come to line. So, for example, you see that there is what we call contour maps. Contour maps were not there before. Through this project, contour maps were created. We have a monitoring network were digitized, were created at the regional level. At the regional level, from Guinea down to Nigeria. So you have all this information, and a database system was also created. Likewise, you cannot talk about AGIS without talking about the challenges experienced so far. Some challenges are there. Why doing it? Some were able to overcome, and some are still not yet attended to. In a brief context, these are just part of the challenges I put here. At the beginning of the project, there was a poor response from member countries in terms of data provision on groundwater. Some countries, it took them time to provide available data on groundwater. We have weak facilitation from countries that are part of this project. It took them time to respond to mail, to letter, to visit, and to do some survey. So these are part of the problem experienced at the beginning of the project. As I've said earlier, where we have groundwater observation or monitoring networks in member countries, some of them are not working again. Some of this network has been vandalized. Some are not in good shape. So these are the issues experienced at the beginning, and we have a poor monitoring and observations from member countries. They don't take care of this I call it infrastructure. Sometimes they don't even understand why these networks or this monitoring system are in place. And for those that understand the reason, there is no capacity for them to go and pick data and put it in appropriate a place for analysis. We have lack of responsibility for ownership. So we have seen that all these issues were many at the country level. So any project that are developed ownership is very, very, very important. They must be able to give account and take responsibility of the project even after the implementation. We have a poor awareness. Awareness is so low about groundwater in some of these other countries. They see groundwater as a local resource that is just in your compound or in your farm. So it is my responsibility to manage it. It goes beyond that because your activities here can affect the activities at the downstream. So all these informations were able to tackle as the project progressed. We have delay in implementation due to COVID-19 last year, and so we have a lot of issues about the security in some part of the member countries. Some area we cannot go there because of the security challenges in those areas. And nevertheless, don't forget about the governance and policy issue about at country level. Sometimes we don't have this document, there is no policy existing. Sometimes the policy are not implemented, and when it is implemented, there is no enforcement. Next slide. Quickly, we talk about the achievement of the project at the regional level, and what are the achievements so far? So far, because AGIS is still ongoing, it will be running up next year. Maybe it will be extended, we don't know. But as at now, we have recorded some pool of achievements. Like, for example, before the intervention, prior to the intervention, there was nothing like a database system. Now we have groundwater management database at the basin. We have a regional network already put in place through the projects, and also all this information about groundwater were also being able to achieve. For example, we know those potential aquifers in the basin. Where are these aquifers located? We know them, and we have them in the maps. We have these maps that are now putting together. We call it harmonization of geological maps and groundwater recharge areas. We're able to know all these things from this project. And as I've said earlier, there is also better cooperation and interaction among member countries because of this project. Before, everybody know or behave that my water is my water. Now you see that your water is my water, my water is your water. So you have to protect my water for you to use. So we have this understanding at the basin, and it's still ongoing. There is more cooperation and more interaction among the member countries. Data sharing is very important, and this also be improved. Next slide. What are the lessons learned? It
will be time
Yes.
to round off your presentation, please.
Okay, yeah. The lessons learned. Quickly, what are the lessons learned in this project so far? Lessons learned. Slide 16, lesson learned. So now we have been able to have understanding that there's a correlation between capacity buildings and improved groundwater observation network or monitoring network. If you improve my capacity, there will be improvement on the management of observation or monitoring networks. So this has been established through the project at the project site, at the project area. Correlation between capacity building, as I've said, and groundwater data collection. We have availability of budget, have impacts. If there is a budget, there will be more service, there will be more work to be done in terms of groundwater management. And likewise, you have knowledge transfer has direct impact at regional level, then to the country level. We have understanding that there is interlinkage now, and interdependency of surface and groundwater. That is to say, we have to manage them together holistically. Next slide. Next slide, that is the conclusion. So far, so good. We have seen that the two projects that are ongoing now, the AGIS project and ITAS project, exclusively is handling the issue of groundwater at the region. But nevertheless, there are still a lot of work to be done because it is an area that has been neglected for many years. So all this information, data collection systems are just coming in now. So we need more of intervention, more of support from organizations, institutions like IGRAC, UNESCO, IHP to come to NBA to see how we can develop and improve the groundwater management in the basin. So all these are put together as a conclusion. And the most striking one is that, as I've said, is that there is a need for more studies. There is a need for more studies on River Niger and the associated groundwater aquifers, interconnection in the basin. Before, we see that it is only River Niger. Now, it is not only River Niger. There is a water coming into River Niger from the groundwater, and there is a water coming from groundwater into River Niger. So we have to study this together holistically for the betterment of our people and also the associated ecosystem. Thank you very much for your time. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Walter. Great presentation, and nice to have concrete examples of what's going on in a river basin organization like NBA. There will be other examples tomorrow morning. We'll continue this session with examples and testimonies from river basin organizations. But for now, we still have 30 minutes before the end of today's session, and we can use those 30 minutes to exchange a bit. There were some questions in the chat and a few raised hands. So we'll give the floor to Dr. Muhammad. You had one, maybe two questions, so please let us know.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much, Arnaud. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. During your presentation on data sharing information system on groundwater management and monitoring, I saw those groundwater data you presented from the US and the Southern African Development Community. But there were virtually empty spaces of such studies from West Africa, North Africa, and Central Africa with respect to groundwater management information and monitoring system. Why is that? Does it mean that they were absent of data, could not access, or what caused that gap? Because there are lakes and there are aquifers in those areas. That is the first question. The second question is the possibility of, this is a question to Christina Fraser, that expertise are needed for hydrogeological development. That means hydrogeologists on capacity building. They are really, really needed. What are the methodologies of recruitment process to train more hydrogeologists through sensitization? Is it university, or is it other medium you want to use? What are your methodology to get hydrogeologists recruited for more training and education on groundwater management and monitoring in this period of time? Because people are lacking knowledge on this issue, and informations are not sensitized, are not spread widely to know the significance of groundwater management on this issue. And the third question is to the MBA. The MBA, Mr. Walter, talks about groundwater activities, programs, and projects have been redundant for years in the region. What led to this redundancy, and what is the solution to wake it up, to wake those programs and activities up? I think Mr. Walter is the best person to give us the idea on a way forward. Thank you very much.
So we'll answer in the same order. Thank you for your questions, Dr. Muhammad. On data sharing in other parts of Africa, you mentioned there is a gap in data sharing, groundwater data sharing in Western Africa, Northern Africa. I'm also not aware of much going on in Eastern Africa and in Central Africa, although Central Africa, because there's so much surface water available in general, they tend to care less about groundwater. But I think there is, we are aware of initiatives. There are some information portals. We know in countries where some data can be accessed. We have examples in Eastern Africa, in Western Africa, and in Northern Africa. We know OSS, the Sahel and Sahara Observatory, has been involved in several transboundary aquifers, and as part of the projects, they have set up data sharing platforms. The only thing I don't know right now the addresses of those platforms, but I know they have done something on data sharing. I know a few years ago there was a water information portal in Benin, for instance, with containing groundwater data, if I remember correctly. So there are things going on, but maybe what is missing compared to the SADC region is a centralized institution and a sort of hub to promote data sharing and to synchronize those different initiatives of groundwater data sharing. And so, but I know, yeah, it's there are discussions going on. The other regional economic communities are looking at what's going on in SADC and they find it interesting. So there is that might be coming in the next years. We'll see. So I hope that answers your first question. I will let my colleague Christina answer to your second question, and then Walter will answer your third question.
Yeah, I guess on the second question, it's not an easy question really, because ultimately currently the capacity isn't there, and how do we increase that? Often, you know, if we're talking about recruiting hydrogeologists, there needs to be people to recruit within the region. So that's where the university programs in country can assist. And then on a shorter kind of term training programs like this. But I agree it's not enough, and more needs to be done. And often main limitation is financial resources for these kind of trainings. I quite liked the, I was just going to say, I quite liked the, you know, SADC GMI have various initiatives to train young professionals and actually getting young professionals in at a young age and training them up as they go through the process of various roles, and then that's something where it could help. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
Maybe just to complement, to me, it looks a bit like a chicken and egg issue, because it happens you have organizations, they're looking for a hydrogeologist and there is none available, but it also happens that graduates in hydrogeology don't find a job after graduating. So I guess it goes both ways.
Yeah, for sure. And I think,
but it's a complex issue indeed.
Mm.
We can then give the opportunity to Walter to answer your third question. Walter, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arnaud. The question regarding the redundancy of groundwater programs activities in the basin before now, as I said earlier, the basin is evolving, and because of the composition of the basin, we are talking about 9 countries, coming together to create the authority. So in the process of time, there is no kind of, let me use the word awareness or the importance of linking the groundwater to the surface water. So emphasis was on River Niger, the surface water, that they are seeing the river flowing. So sometimes, if you don't have the understanding that even the groundwater is also flowing. So I can say that it's because of lack of awareness or sensitization regarding the interconnectivity of groundwater and surface water. But thank God, as I've said, there was a water charter. There was a document called NBA Water Charter that is developed in perspective or in principles of integrated water resources management. So this water charter implementation has made it compulsory for NBA at the regional level to also seek to the management of groundwater as we are focusing on surface water. I think I've answered your question.
Thank you, Walter. We will then move to Aquatery, then Arbab, then Seifu, Professor Gourmessa.
Hello, good morning. This is Dr. Oteri Akoteri. I have a question and a comment. The first one goes to the presenter who made the presentation on the collection of hydrogeological data. And my question is, in some countries like USA, Canada, and others, which have states and regions, the primary collection center is in the states, in the various states. I mean, they do the registration of drillers and what have you, and the data is submitted to them. But there are other countries where everything is centralized. From your experience, please, what are the advantages and disadvantages of either method, and which one will you recommend for a big country like Nigeria? That is the first question. The second one is on the Niger Basin Authority. That was a very good presentation, and as a Nigerian, I'm happy the Niger Basin Authority is looking into groundwater instead of just surface water. But my own suggestion is that they should also try and incorporate hydrogeological consultants in the private sector and in the universities. There's a lot of work that has been done on the various aquifers and is being done by this group. But because the river basin, the Niger Basin Authority only interacts with central government, and there hasn't been that coordination in some of these countries, they are not getting the data that is available. So I'm sure if they incorporate people from their knowledge from these sectors, will have a more robust and purposeful and timely look at our groundwater and know what is here. Thank you very much.
So I will try to answer your first question on whether it's better to centralize groundwater management or to have it decentralized like in some other countries. I don't know really what's best is has to do. I mean, it's more than just groundwater data collection. It's the whole water management in general. So it has to be in line with the regional, the organization of the country itself. So, for instance, in a country like Canada, with national regions and then a federal state, it is logical then water and groundwater be managed at the state level. I mean, in a decentralized way. But I think in terms of when it comes to groundwater data collection, management, and sharing, it doesn't really matter in the end, because now with the technology available, there is a possibility to share data across different platforms. So for instance, if you take the United States, it is true they have groundwater monitoring activities going on at different levels, at the state level, but also, if I remember, there were also other units, other organizations having groundwater monitoring program. But what is important is that in the end, there is a national groundwater monitoring program where they're not monitoring the data themselves, but they're just making sure that all the data be gathered into one system. I can share later in the chat the address. So there is a platform, I think called National Groundwater Monitoring Program, where you have access to all groundwater monitoring data in the country. Maybe not all, but a selection of them. So you see, with the technology, it doesn't really matter who collects the data as long as they become available in other platforms and at different levels. So yeah, that was to answer your first question. I don't remember what was the next question.
The second one was on the MBA.
Yeah, that was
suggesting that they should try and incorporate hydrogeologists in the private sector and the investors. Then they will have more robust data than just going through agencies of the federal government or government in Benin or whatever.
Oh yeah. I remember. I think you wrote that in the chat too. So that was more a comment for the colleagues at NBA. That's also, I agree with that. So of course, the national governments or water authorities, they are the main stakeholders, but there are more people, more organizations who can be involved and who can make a significant contribution to those projects and those studies. So I said, thank you for your intervention. Then we'll, Arbab, you have a question?
Good morning. Actually, it's not a question, but I'm requesting you and your team, if you can share with us if you have a list of recognized bodies for water data collection, so you can share with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Seifu, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you, Arnaud. Sorry that I missed the earlier presentations, but my question is about hydrological boundaries and how to deal with institutions to manage those hydrological boundaries. Like, for instance, in the ITAS case that Walter has nicely presented, it began with the IAS, I guess, the Illumiden Aquifer system, a study on the Illumiden Aquifer system, and then that has culminated into the formation of a consultative mechanism, IAS consultative mechanism, signed between 3 countries, I think, Nigeria, Mali, and I think Niger. And then later, it has been proved that the Illumiden Aquifer is also connected to the Taudeni and Tanzuruf aquifer system, and then the need for expanding the scope of IAS into a new geographic area, incorporating ITAS, has been promoted, and then 7 countries have signed another agreement, form of consultative mechanism, and the geographic scope of it has expanded. Sorry, okay. And then now when we think of integrating groundwater management and surface water management under conjunctive use process, like the ITAS, the new ITAS project, then it necessitated to include countries implicated hydrologically, like Senegal, Mauritania, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Cameroon. For instance, in this, if you want to integrate surface water and groundwater under conjunctive use, you are and then have one institution, you'll have to put Cote d'Ivoire with Senegal. And Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal has nothing in common in terms of what they share, but Senegal shares groundwater with, let's say, Algeria and with Mali, but Cote d'Ivoire doesn't share an aquifer with Senegal. So it becomes very complicated. So the hydrological boundaries and the groundwater, the surface water boundaries, the groundwater boundary are different. And then what kind of management arrangement is feasible in this condition? If you keep enlarging, we enlarge into the Chad Basin, the Chad connects into Egypt. So what is the boundary? Where do you put the boundary for management? And then how can we deal with this problem, and what kind of institutions? And then how can we overcome the impulse of, hydrology leading the institutions, hydrological boundary leading the institutions, rather than, the economy, the socioeconomics, the regional political arrangements, etc. So any thought on that is welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Sefu. That's an excellent question, and I don't have a clear answer to that. So I can try to formulate one, but I also invite everybody else in the audience to say something if they have another piece of answer. First of all, I'm not aware of any management arrangements regarding groundwater resources, at least in the project where we were involved. All the projects were on assessment, on cooperation, transboundary cooperation, but I'm not aware yet of management arrangements. For instance, you mentioned the ITAS, because the countries share the same part of the same sedimentary basin. It is logical that they contribute to an assessment project of groundwater within the basin. But you're right, is it really hydrogeological connection between countries which are very far away from each other? And is it necessary that they engage in some management agreement? I'm not sure. But I also think that it will be hard to always find, you cannot set up a mechanism for each hydrological and hydrogeological units in Africa. For instance, you remember the Stampede transboundary aquifer system. It is shared between 3 countries: Botswana, South Africa, and Namibia. So those were the 3 countries who were part of the original project on groundwater assessment in the STAS. Then this mechanism, this multi-cooperation, country cooperation mechanism of the STAS has moved to ORASECOM, the Orange Senku River Basin organization, where Lesotho is also part of this river basin organization. Yet, when the groundwater committee of ORASECOM meets and discuss and addresses things of the STAS, there is a representative from Lesotho. It's not really an issue. It's good if some other country is involved, although they don't have direct stake in the STAS. It's not an issue for the countries if Lesotho is around the table. So that's one thing. And another thing is what can help avoiding those issues of hydrological units. It's to zoom out, to go at at the level above, for instance, at the level of a regional economic community. And again, if we look at what they've done in SADC with the SADC Groundwater Management Institute, this institute and the activities, it reaches all SADC members. So there's no matter of who is part of which country and which TBA, which basin. All countries are part of the have a stake in this regional institution. So that can also be a way forward. So this is what I have to say. Like I said, I'm not. It's not a clear or direct answer, but maybe someone else has something to say on that.
If Walter or Christina would want to say, I'll be happy to hear from them.
Okay, let me just make a little contribution. I have just put some information on the mail here for everyone to see, because the question was talking about regional management of groundwater regarding the aquifers in the basin and outside the basin. For example, the project ITAS, like I said earlier, 2 countries were involved, Algeria and Mauritania. These 2 countries, hydrologically, in terms of the basin catchment of MBA, they are not part of MBA. But because we are looking at groundwater movement now, they are part of the project ITAS, because there is a link in the aquifer in Mauritania and Algeria to the aquifer in NBA basin, especially the Rumedin. So the Taudin, the Taudin and Tezel, there is an interlink. So that is why Algeria and Mauritania are part of the project ITAS. And in terms of the management now, there is a framework, because groundwater management in Taudin Basin is not about that particular basin, it's about the institutional arrangement in that area. Don't forget, they have their own groundwater institutions which share data with relevant organizations. For example, OSS. OSS is working in almost in the sub-Sahara and Africa at large. So OSS, they have a lot of data, a lot of information about groundwater in Africa. So if there is a need for data management or for data inquiries or information about groundwater, I think OSS is a relevant institution in the sub-Sahara, because they have done a lot of studies, a lot of research, and they are part of the project ITAS. In fact, they are responsible for the component 1, which has to do with the diagnostics analysis. I think maybe that can satisfy part of your inquiries. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Yeah, that's probably we could discuss for a long time on this issue, and probably there's no easy answer at hand. But we need to finish today's session now, because it's already 1 p.m. So I would like to thank my colleagues for the good presentations today, and I'd like to thank Walter also for this excellent presentation on the groundwater projects at NBA. And of course, I'd like to thank you all for attending and participating in the discussion. So tomorrow we will have our 3rd and last session. Well, same time, same place as usual. So we look forward to meet you tomorrow morning to continue this discourse. Thank you again, and have a good afternoon.